Let's talk about, and all religions have this, but when you were growing up and you were hanging around other teens and young kids, are people very obedient to the religion, or would you find, yeah, we're all going to services, but if you knew what we were doing in our free time, we'd all be stunned? Or does everybody live a clean and religious life that you found?
Well, I think my experience getting older and seeing more of other religions and other people is there are just people who take stuff serious, and there are people who don't. And so you'll have people that take their religion very serious no matter what their religion is. And then inside that same religion, you'll have people that put on the outward appearance of taking it seriously to enjoy the social benefits of the outward behavior. But inwardly, they either know it's a joke, or they think it's a joke, or they don't believe it. Or, for example, I had a friend when I was a teenager who on Saturday nights, he would go break into cars and steal stereos. And then the next day on Sunday, we'd go to church and we'd be blessing and passing the sacrament together as priesthood holders. And I mean, I knew what he was doing, and I mean, he knew what he was doing. And, my understanding was he was working on his thieving issues with the ward bishop and repentance. And I didn't feel like it was my business whether or not he was considered worthy to bless and pass the sacrament at church. But I didn't feel like it was my business, but I knew I took it very seriously to make sure that I was living in a way that would qualify me to hold the priesthood in the eyes of the church. I guess I'm just the kind of person where I see stuff, I see what's going on around me, but like I take it serious, and I'm not into other people's business. And so it's like every church, I think. You find serious people, and you'll find the guys that drink Saturday night and come to church Sunday and give a good talk about, being sober or whatever.
Let's talk about some of the kooky things. I find this fascinating. Fill me in from an insider's point of view. Things like magic underwear. I don't think anybody out there other than Mormons know about this. You need to talk about that. And I think it's also interesting, you mentioned this, that you have to give a big chunk of your salary to the Mormon Church.
Yeah. We'll go in order. Well, maybe actually reverse order would be better for this, because you get your magic underwear or the garments from the temple. The Mormon temple is where you are first to wear them.
And when do you wear them? Eric, when do you actually wear this? Is it every night?
No. Okay. So what happens is you're a regular guy or gal, and you grow up as a Mormon until you get something called your endowments. And when you get your endowments, you're given your garments, your underwear.
What do they call it, by the way? So let's call it the right thing.
They call them the garment. They call them garments.
Okay, not magic underwear. I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, when you listen to what they believe the underwear does for you, it would be hard to not confuse them with magic.
Okay.
But basically, when most men in the church get their garments or their underwear from the church at the time that they decide they're going to go serve a 2-year missionary service, a proselytizing mission for the church, which they pay for themselves, as a matter of fact. So the church has a good thing going because they have people going to preach for them and get more members for them, and they're actually paying to the church to do it for them. It's a good way to do it if you're going to do it for the church. These young men turned 19, now it's 18. They lowered the age, probably because people are figuring out younger and younger that the church isn't true, and so they had to kind of make it so that if they're going to get missionaries out in the field, they need to get them even younger. I don't know about you. I'm 36. 18-year-olds to me are just little kids. I mean, they're children. I remember being 18 and thought I was an adult, but the church is basically sending out just babies, and I feel bad saying it, but they are. Yeah. And they went from 19 to 18, and I think the reason might be because of the fact that they're having more and more young men fall away from the church younger and younger as more and more information is available. But that being said, that's when most of them will get their endowment. So before you can go on and serve a Mormon mission, you have to go to the temple and get your endowments. And that's where you'd start wearing your underwear. And from there on, you wear it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year until you die. You're buried in it. And
wait, you're buried in the magic underwear at the end. You put that on, and then they put your suit on, and okay,
yeah,
okay.
And a lot of members of the church are buried in temple clothes. So on top of your garment, when you go to the temple, you wear special clothes over the garment, and many people choose to be buried in their temple clothing, expecting to be resurrected and expecting to have to go through certain types of handshakes and know certain things to say to certain people to get into heaven, wearing certain clothes. So those are worn 24/7 until you die from the time you get them. For most women, they don't get them till they're married in the temple. So Mormons get their marriage ceremony done in a temple, and that's most of the guys have gone on a mission and already have their garment, and that's usually when they get a wife and their wife starts wearing them from then on too. So
Okay, so you're using that magic underwear your whole life. Now, what about if I go into the Mormon religion? I have to give a certain amount of my paycheck to them. Is that how that works?
yeah, so the Mormon Church believes in something they call it the law of tithing, and it's one of the things that you promise in the temple that you'll do as a member of the church. The point of going to the temple is to promise certain things to God. One of them is that you'll obey the law of tithing, and you'll always give 10% of your increase to the church. And so every time you get paid, you cut a check to your ward bishop for 10% of that. And if you're not honest with your bishop and he finds out, or you don't pay your 10%, he'll take away your temple recommend. The temple recommend is important because that's what allows you to go into the temple. Anytime you'd like to go to a temple anywhere in the world, you can go as long as you present the guy at the desk with your temple recommend. And it needs to be signed by your stake president and your bishop. And if one of them revokes that or suspends it or takes it away, you can't enter into the temple. If you can't enter into the temple, you cannot participate in the ceremonies. It's believed that if you're not a member in good standing with the temple recommend, you're at risk that if you die in such a state that you may not be worthy to enter into heaven, the highest degree of glory. They believe in degrees of glory, degrees of heaven, and the highest one, you would definitely want to be a card-carrying temple recommend carrying member at the time of your death, or you might have some splaining to do on the other side, and maybe have to get a little bit of mercy to be allowed in.
So what's the frickin' percentage you've got to give away? How much is it, did you say?
10%.
10%. So 10%, is it gross or net?
Well, there's argument about that. The strong-minded Mormons will. I mean, some people, I think it's a competition to who's more spiritual than who. So
there you go.
One member may say, I see you pay on your net. That's cool. I pay on my gross. Maybe I'm a little more spiritual than you. That kind of nonsense. But I think you can get away with either one. The scripture itself says on your increase. Some people don't consider their gross to be their actual increase because Uncle Sam takes his cut. So.
Holy crap. So do you give it from each paycheck, like each week? Is it like a monthly deal, a yearly? How does that work?
Some people pay yearly. Some people just say, hey, I'm going to just pay it all up front this year. Some people pay weekly with their paycheck. Some people pay monthly.
Do people grumble when they do it, or does no one say anything? Nobody thinks that's odd. They work hard and they're working hard paving streets in Salt Lake, and then it's like the tax man coming again.
Oh, Randy. It's Old Testament stuff, though. You can't even argue. It's not even Joseph Smith's idea. If you look at the Old Testament, the law, there's tithing in there. Tithing comes from Latin or Greek or whatever for a tenth. It's a fixed thing, even in the Old Testament. And I think a lot of Christians outside of Mormonism would agree that a tithe is 10%. I don't know what other churches require it, but it's in there. It's in all those scriptures.
Gosh. But do you really think like Protestants and Catholics are giving 10%? I just don't feel like I see the offering go around and I go, there's a buck, there's $5, and that's pretty much it.
You can't get people to give you 10% if you're going to be a Catholic or you're going to be a Protestant and you're not going to get your members to invest their lives into that organization like you do as a Mormon. You couldn't convince people to give 10%. They'd fall away from your church and say, this is crazy. There's no way I can give you 10%, because they're not nearly as invested. Not nearly as invested as a believing Mormon. You're invested. You know what I mean? You're given that 10%, and you expect blessings. You expect that you're going to be compensated through. The Mormon Church actually believes that if you pay your tithing, the result will be temporal blessings or physical, financial blessings. That you will actually do better financially if you give it. And that's what the church actually teaches, that you'll be better off financially temporarily for paying it. So the ones that believe this are giving it excited because they think it's going to really benefit them financially to do it in another way, or temporarily in another way, or at least they feel like they'll always have the security of knowing that they won't go without, because the church really won't let you go without. If you can't pay your mortgage and if you have a temple recommend and you can't pay your mortgage that month, you can ask the bishop to help you out, and he generally will help people struggling with food, rent, that kind of stuff. But it is required that you will pay your tithing to receive that. So
interesting. Anything else real weird, just really odd that you have found through Mormonism? Just quirky things like this, the underwear. What else? Is there things that would astound me?
We do have a history with polygamy in the church, and Mormons today still believe polygamy is an eternal law. So whether Mormons today practice polygamy or not, any Mormon who's a believing Mormon does believe that polygamy is something that will be happening in the next life. We just don't do it now because the government won't allow it or whatever. Our church was fractured early on because when Utah wanted to become a state, polygamy had to be banned in order for the federal government to allow Utah statehood. And there was a faction of the church that broke off and said, well, this is awful. You don't change your doctrine just because the government. And so they went and kept their own way of life down in southern Utah. And they're fundamentalist Mormons who still practice polygamy. And you've probably heard of Warren Jeffs. He was on the FBI's top 10 most wanted and all that. But so some quirky things would be, for example, as a Mormon man, I could get married in the temple, and then I could get divorced in the temple, or I could just get divorced civilly, and then I could go get married again in the temple to my new wife, and I could actually be married under the church's eyes. I'm married now to 2 women simultaneously. Civilly, in society, I only have 1 wife, but the church will recognize that I have 2 wives. And unless I go to the temple and get a temple divorce from one of those women, they're both my wives in the next world.
Wait, go back to that, Eric. So then you divorce her, but then she still wants to stay with you?
Well, no, what would happen is basically if I got married and divorced, let's say I got married 5 times and divorced 4 times, and all of them were temple marriages.
Okay.
I am now married in the eyes of the church to 5 women simultaneously. However, because I went to the state of Utah and got a divorce, the state of Utah only recognizes that I'm married to just the one. So if one of those women doesn't want to be married to me in the next life, they have to go to the church and try to get a temple divorce from me. Now, here's the interesting thing. Speaking of religion being made by men for men, women can't do that. If a woman gets divorced and she was married in the temple, gets divorced and wants to marry this new guy and wants to go to the temple, the Mormon church will say, no, you can't be married to 2 men in our eyes. You have to go get a temple divorce from that first guy, and then we'll give you a new temple marriage to this guy. So it doesn't work both ways. I could rake up 5 marriages and think I'm going to the next life with 5 women. 4 of them might hate my guts as my ex-wives. But the Mormon church doesn't think. The Mormon church believes you don't get into the celestial kingdom, the heaven, as a single person. You come in a pair. So if any of those women want to get to the highest degree of glory and they don't have a temple marriage to another guy, they're going to have to come with me as one of my exes, as one of my wives. Like, no, they're not getting in. So, and it's hard to get for a woman to get a temple divorce is very, very hard. It's just the church is clearly not all about that. It's for the men.
It's clear that men were making these rules. It's obvious.
Either God is clearly a man and it's really all true, and he just doesn't care for women, or some guys made this church and said they did it with communication from God, and I think that's much more reasonable belief.
So were some of your friends growing up with multiple wives, and I'm talking about people living all in the same house? Did you see much of that, or was that somewhere else?
No, the Mormon Church doesn't practice polygamy in society, just in the temple marriage, just as an idea. But then we believe when you die,
right,
you still have multiple wives. There are fundamentalist Mormons, and you see them around. You see them in Arizona and southern Utah. Right. You see them around. And yeah, they're a different church. They're a different Mormon church. They're an offshoot, and they would consider themselves to be the pure church, the real church. They have their own prophet. They have their own history of prophets going back to when the church stopped polygamy, and they disagreed with that decision, and they got their own new prophet. So, yeah, you see those people around, but they're not part of the 15 million member Mormon church that most people think of. They're pretty easily identifiable. They have magic underwear too. Their garments they kept originally. Originally the garment went down to your wrists and down to your ankles. And so the Mormons that you think of and that I think of that I used to be, they shortened them up to just t-shirt size and short size. So the fundamentalist Mormons are hard to miss because they will wear clothing to their wrist and down to their ankles. Even in the summer, women will wear dresses all the way down to their ankles because the Mormons believe they have to keep their garments covered. There are things stitched into the garment that are to be not seen by non-members. They're symbols that are sewn into the fabric, and so they're not supposed to be shown.
I kind of get the whole. Well, hang on, I got to be careful here. I kind of get the whole idea of everyone in the old days living together, maybe even having multiple wives, 20 kids, because you had to farm, you had to work hard. I'm trying to understand why any man and any woman, why any man would want to have 5 wives. That would be exhausting just to make people happy. And then why any woman would want to share one man. I don't know. It's weird to me.
It's more brainwashing. It's more echo chambers. It's more from the time they're born. It's all that they know. I remember when I was 3 or 4 years old, I remember being put in front of a room full of children in primary school, which is what they call Sunday school for little kids in the Mormon Church. And a grown woman whispered in my ear and told me to repeat what she was saying. And she whispered in my ear, she said, "I'd like to bear my testimony." And what, you think I want to stand up in front of 100 other kids and bear my testimony as a 3-year-old? And then I was supposed to say, "I know the church is true. I know Joseph Smith is a prophet." This is something that is spoken from the pulpit every week by members of the church to each other. They take it in, they give it back, and it is reverberating around the building, and they believe it for 3 hours. This is done 3 hours a week, plus all the other times I told you about at night and whatever. Their whole lives. You can get people to believe, a woman, you can get her to believe that her highest calling in life would be to be a plural wife. For sure you can. You just have to start when they're young, when their brains are still developing, when they have no frontal lobe yet. And you got to make sure it's ingrained in them before they develop that frontal lobe. And you can do it. And it's done all the time.
No more Roach on Florida TV.